comments concerning the recent events surrounding the snowstorm, people coming on the golf course property. So we're going to entertain those comments and any discussion on that subject at this point, and then we will resume our normal agenda afterwards.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Apologies, I'm on.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Okay.
Sorry, guys.
So we now have a quorum with 3 commissioners, Jim Carr, Rob Plinger, and myself, Chris Maynard. I don't know who all else may be on here, but certainly normally this meeting includes Brad Shirley, our golf course professional and manager, and David Bettis and Lynn Ray from Golf Management Group, and Andy Gillian, Keith Bruce from Parks and Recreation. And normally the Alderman Jonathan Hayes and Eddie Roberson are also part of this meeting. I wonder who else is in attendance today that maybe I haven't identified, and who would like to speak today on this subject surrounding the snowstorm events.
Well, just for purposes of clarification, my name is Paul Harbsmeyer, and I'm the interim city administrator. I don't have anything specifically to speak on unless there's a question, but I didn't want to attend the meeting.
Good. Welcome.
I'm Rachel Collins. I'm the other alderman for Ward 5 along with Jonathan. And the only thing I want to say right now is that the general feeling is that people in that neighborhood like that the kids come and sled, and it's a special part of their childhood for their children, and they want to keep the few bad eggs from ruining it. We just, yeah.
I'm Nell Rogan with the police department. Mr. Gilly asked me through Chief Miller to be on here just in case y'all had questions.
Good. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other citizens that want to make any comments that are on this meeting that want to make comments on this subject?
Chris, my name's Rob Phillips. I'm a homeowner here in around the golf course.
Yes.
And been here 18 years. And this is generally an annual event, the duration of which depends upon how much snow we've had and how cold it stays. But this particular year, this stuff seemed to last for almost 4 days. And I got in touch with Rachel Collins and Mr. Haynes as my alderman, and they also represent the city, in order to let them know that I have no objections to the people using the golf course. That's not my issue. My issue this year was the constant bombardment of people trespassing through our private property to gain access to the golf course, to the point where the Thursday of the week this transpired, and the Friday of this week, I believe there were injuries on the golf course. And again, I don't care if somebody gets hurt. That's up to them. My point is that the emergency vehicles coming in through Masters Glen couldn't get to these people because of the large volume of cars parked on both sides of the street. And again, as a homeowner, I'm concerned that emergency equipment couldn't get to my home should it catch fire, or to me, should I have a medical emergency. I understand I can't stop people from parking on the streets, but the constant from 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night of people walking through our yards to get to the golf course is an infringement. And that's basically my position. And as I say, I've been watching this for a long time. This year was particularly bad.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Is there anybody else that's on, in addition to Rob, that would like to make comments?
No comments, just announce Robert Manning, Finance Director,
Yes,
say
yes.
I'm on.
Okay, good. I have some thoughts on this subject. If there's nobody else to make comments, I'll share them, and we're trying to see how far that we can go with our responsibilities on the golf course commission. And I think recognizing, as Robert does, that, with this city property, it's if people can have fun, safe access to it, I'm not sure anybody's looking to shut that down completely. I would suggest that we could do the following that may help this to some extent. It's not going to help all of it. And I think the city and the police department, between the streets and the property line at the back, have to maybe address what we may not be able to. But I think one thing we could certainly do is affirm as a golf course commission that the golf course property is open from 30 minutes before sunrise to 30 minutes after sunset, and after that time, there should be no activity on the golf course. I would think other than our normal golf course maintenance and any rental associated with our meeting space in the clubhouse, and this is not just during snowstorms, this is all during the year. I think the second thing that is certainly in our interest, and I understand there may have been some of this going on, and Mr. Phillips, I'm sure if it occurred, he was aware of it, but certainly we would seek to prohibit the operation of any motorized equipment on that golf course that is not Country Hills equipment, to the extent that there may have been four-wheelers or other equipment out there. And that we would ask the Hendersonville Police Department to enforce these two resolutions upon the receipt of any complaint. I think the fourth thing that we could consider that may help some of this is that coincidental with the hours in which the property is open, that we could consider opening the gates to the parking lot at Country Hills to try to provide some safe off-street parking for those that are trying to access the golf course for safe and appropriate activities. But we would ask, even if that occurs, that the Hendersonville Police Department would monitor any activity that goes on in that parking lot and monitor from time to time. Commissioners, Andy, Keith, y'all help me out here. That's some suggestions that I would offer to try to help deal with this from the responsibilities of the golf course and the golf course commission. Help me out here, folks.
This is Rob. I'm familiar with where you live, Mr. Phillips. You're right off of. What's that?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say I drove through the neighborhood yesterday, and you're kind of in a perfect storm area, no pun intended. But is there something that could be done from the city's perspective? I guess the reason why there was such a bottleneck in that area is because I would imagine that out of all the golf holes out there that are attractive for sledding, I would say hole number 13 and hole number 14 would probably be the top two, given the way they're shaped and the way they're sloped. And then as far as parking goes, I drove through that neighborhood yesterday, and as you drive up to the cul-de-sac that allows access, through those yards onto the tee box on hole number 14, which then the top of the hill over on 13 would just be an easy walk. From there is an abundance of parking, both down the hill and then up the hill. And I wonder, and I guess I would direct this question towards the city, is based on my observation, there's no earthly reason why anybody would ever need to park in that area. There's no houses in that area. Could it be posted in that area that there's no parking anytime? And then that would eliminate the vast majority of people who are going to park in that area. Is there any way we could restrict access to the golf course, to restrict access on hole number 14 and hole number 13? Because I kind of like where Chris is going, and try to funnel the parking. This is really a difficult situation because it's almost like, either it's kind of an all or nothing situation. Either you make allowances or you just shut the whole thing down. And I know a lot of people who live around the golf course pay a premium to live around the golf course, and they utilize the golf course, in off hours, walking, the nature that's out there. It's a nice place to live. So does everybody know what I'm talking about? The street that leads up to Mr. Phillips' cul-de-sac, and then the street that goes beyond, there's a lot of parking area down there. I wonder if the city could just make that a no parking zone, and that would take care of a lot of the issue.
Seems like barrels could be put up to prevent people from parking there.
What about a city ordinance to make it, to generate a fine for parking there?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Commander Rogan, question for you. The concern about the inability of emergency vehicles to service that area, what does the police department do on similar events where there is a lack of access for emergency vehicles?
So if I'm understanding correctly, the problem was there were people parked on both sides of the street and wouldn't allow a fire engine up there. Is that the question at hand, or the issue at hand?
That's correct.
Okay. So I guess I'm not understanding, if we make it no parking, how that's going to help. Just, I guess, reduce the people that park there intermittently and not for the snowstorm sledding.
Well, I don't think anybody parks there anyway. The only time someone parks there is in the wintertime when they want to go sledding on country hills.
I got you.
Right.
So I'm assuming this is at the back, all the way up on top is where the.
No, ma'am. This is from the very start of Masters Glen all the way around back here to Crestwood Court.
The parking area he was talking about is what I was asking about. So in events where we have large crowds, like the Freedom Festival, Sumner Fest, stuff like that, we always insert a engine or EMS personnel in the middle of it. The difficulty that HPD has in closing the whole thing down that night was we don't have enough people to close that whole thing down. So people were going to sled, and they were going to do what they were going to do, and we didn't have enough resources to shut that whole thing down. We tried our best by walking. I had officers slip and fall up we couldn't even get our cars up to the back. But I do understand the problem there. So I guess the solution maybe from, Mr. Roberson, you asked what we do normally. I know you can't plan for a snowstorm, but you can probably have a few days notice that it might happen. And we don't have a full engine. Sometimes we just have the fire department's little UTVs with their paramedics on it. That would definitely help. Maybe from the city's standpoint, we could plan for that if you open up the parking lot and have one available in there, manned. And I know you wouldn't know maybe a week in advance, maybe a couple of days in advance that a big snowstorm was coming, but then you hit the button and you go into emergency planning for that event. And maybe it doesn't happen and then you don't have to go. But if it does, we're all ready to do what we need to do.
So is there ever a time where you put up a temporary sign, no parking for public safety purposes? So on snowstorms like this, you might not have caught the first day, but the second and third and fourth and fifth, could the PD put up some kind of temporary, like Alderman Collins said, a barrel, no on-street parking for safety reasons? Or I don't even know if that would work, but at least it would be a deterrent maybe for some.
That might be a roads thing. I know we have cones, but we don't have barrels or anything of that nature. But Public Works might be able to block things off, and we could help them get that out there.
Is there any way the city could make that a no parking zone? There's no earthly reason to park on the road. The road I'm talking about is the main road that as you go into you enter into the Masters Glen area and you stay on that road, and it's almost like a horseshoe, and it goes around. And if you drive from Masters Glen over to the other side, which is the Country Hills entrance, which I think it turns into Spyglass, when you approach the cul-de-sac that Mr. Phillips lives on, you'll see that about 200 or 300 yards before you get to the cul-de-sac, and about 200 or 300 yards after the cul-de-sac, there's plenty of places to park vehicles. As a matter of fact, if you drive through there now, you're still going to see up on the grassy areas above the road where it's still matted down where people were parked. Now, when you go into Mr. Phillips cul-de-sac, there are not very many places to park inside that cul-de-sac. And I would imagine a lot of those driveways were probably blocked given the limited parking in the cul-de-sac. And that is the preferred, I would guess that is the preferred ingress and egress point for the sledders when it snows, hole number 14 and hole number 13. I'm just guessing at that. But I would imagine which created a lot of the problem, and it are the people who decided to park on that roadway leading up to and after that cul-de-sac. Because when you drive the rest of the roadway, there's not as many places to park when you get past that point, and there's not as many places that create a good ingress and egress in and out of Country Hills. So I'm just asking, is that kind of the bottleneck for this type of situation? And can the city just simply post it as a no parking zone and levy fines to prevent people from even considering to park there? Because I mean, I don't know much about the neighborhood, but I would suspect that it's extremely rare that anybody parks on that roadway in the 200 or 300 yards leading up to cul-de-sac, and the 200 or 300 yards, going past that cul-de-sac turnoff.
I believe I think the homeowners association, at least in Masters Glen, and I'm pretty sure in Country Hills, which isn't as much an issue on that subdivision as it is in Masters Glen, Rob, you're right, is you're not allowed to have overnight parking, period.
Right.
They really clamp down on it. So you're right. Very seldom do you see many people parked on the road. Occasionally when a house is sold and people move in, they don't know the rule, but I think it's made pretty clear to them very, very early up that they're not supposed to be parking on the road. So yes, parking on the road on Masters Glen usually is not an issue. What happens in this situation is there isn't a whole lot of forewarning. It just sort of happens. All of a sudden, we're given 24 hours and the news media lets us know we're about to get a big storm. And it's pretty hard to put a lot of things in place in that short a period of time, such as barrels or signage or any of that kind of thing. Opening up the gates at Country Hills, I think is a step in the right direction. But again, if you look at the number of cars and people that were involved in this thing on that Thursday, you're not going to hold them all. They're going to go somewhere else. The other side of the coin is, if you look at Google Maps, the distance from the golf course parking lot to the top of 13 is exactly a half a mile. How many people are going to carry their sleds, their chairs, coolers, and anything else they want to bring with them a half a mile when they can come up Masters Glen, park in front of somebody's house, walk through their private property, a couple of 100 yards, and they're there. It's just a matter of ease and simplicity. Again, just for the sake of argument, what I kind of thought was, if we can't take maybe an off-duty officer who's looking for extra time, an extra job as they call it, that we could post at the entrance to Masters Glen, Country Hills. I'm trying to think of the subdivision almost across the street from Country Hills over there. They parked over there very badly too. Yeah. And just for an 8 or a 10-hour period, pay that officer to be there and just simply, do you live in this neighborhood? And if the answer is no, then they need to leave. If that's not something that can be done, then we need to have somebody running this loop, as you said, Rob, from the entrance to Country Hills, around back by me, up through my cul-de-sac. I don't think Golf View is a problem. That's too steep back in there. And then out to Masters Glen on a constant basis. Again, this is something that the minute one truck leaves, another takes its place. By the time an officer gets from Masters Glen all the way to Country Hills and that other subdivision comes back to Masters Glen, I guarantee you folks, it's going to be bottlenecked. It happens that fast. And again, I understand this year was rare. The fact that we had so much ice under that snow and it stayed cold for that many days prompted this thing to be a 4-day event. That's very rare. It's usually a 1, maybe a 2-day event. But again, my problem is not with the parking. I don't, I mean, it is, but it isn't. Okay. I mean, I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, I guess I know this happened a few years ago. I guess I can't remember, Brad, what year it happened, but we didn't get the type of snow we had this year. I think it was a couple of inches, 2-3 inches, and the fairway on 13 was damaged very, very badly. It took years to recover. I guess I'm looking at it from a couple of different angles here. I don't like the fact that people were injured. I think that's potentially problematic for us as a city, as a golf course. I know damage can be done to the golf course. I don't think damage was done this year because of the thickness of the ice. But if you don't have the ice and you have just a few inches of snow, you're going to have damage to the course, which is going to, be a financial burden. And so there's a lot of things to consider. And Alderman Collins mentioned that this is kind of a Norman Rockwell thing for, the people in the area to have an opportunity to, and you hate to do anything about that, but it just comes down to, is this an all or nothing situation? Is there anything we can do to mitigate this? Or do we just take measures to stop it altogether at this point?
I think the suggestion of the off-duty officer is a good suggestion. As far as carding them or IDing them, it's still a city street and it's a public street, right? That they can park in. You can't tell somebody they can't park there. However, they can't park so emergency vehicles cannot get through. The ramifications for parking complaints are if you're parked in a no parking area, that's a $15 ticket maybe. If you're parked where emergency vehicles can't get through, then we can tow you. But how realistic is that if you've got 30 vehicles and 2 police officers? Not very realistic after they've already been there. So I think the off-duty officer is great. You get the notification. We've got a lot of off-duty coordinators here, then get you a couple officers, however many you need within 5 minutes if you need them. So that would get them in place before, and they can drive through and tell people, you can park on this side, but you can't park on this side. Emergency vehicles have to be able to come through and then just make a move. You're going to need more than one, I'm assuming, because that's a big curve back there. And as you were saying, they're parking across the street so you may have to have more than 3. You may have to have 4. I don't know.
Yeah, again, like Rob said, if you come up Masters Glen to Crestwood Court, that's about it on that side. The other side, again, the sledding's not that good. It's very hard to get through people's yards, that type of thing. I don't know how much of this took place at the entrance to Country Hills side of all this. Okay. But that's good. That would be good.
Officer Rogan,
Folks, I had a couple questions here. We're talking about patrolling, and I guess I'm curious on who would be expected to be fitting the bill for those officers. Because quite honestly, the golf course is going to have to fix all the damages to the golf course due to the traffic, and I'm not sure that the golf course really should be managing the policing of the local streets. And you're talking about 1, 2, 3 officers over a 5-day period. I don't know what they make an hour, but if we're talking about an 8-hour shift, that's 5 days. That's a chunk of change. And I don't know. And I understand also the as Rob put it, the Norman Rockwell. But I've got to kind of go back to something that Chris said at the very beginning of the call, and that is that theoretically that golf course is a place of business, and when business is closed, that business should not be in use. So while I understand how it's kind of quaint for some of the locals, and I don't think that at the end of the day, if somehow this was stopped and a couple of people in the neighborhood actually did some sledding, I don't think that's what's going to bring the ire. But I think if it is made known that the expectation is for there not to be sledding, then we won't have people driving in from Portland for one of the best hills in Sumner County. And that's something that we have to address. And it's an all or nothing situation, like been brought up before. To allow it to continue, the level of management from the police to recovering any damages on the course seems a little bit misplaced in a theoretical business plan. So that's my two cents there.
The other option, or the other thing I was thinking, and this might be completely out in left field, is there any interest in making revenue off of this situation? If somehow we can eliminate the ingress and egress in some of these areas where they're coming on, whether that be fencing or if the city's willing to invest money to eliminate the ability for people to come in certain areas and then open Country Hills up and charge people to sled at Country Hills under the condition that adults sign waivers, liability waivers, which are, if properly done in Tennessee, are enforceable. So maybe it's a situation where you try to control the situation as opposed to just let it get out of control. And if it's going to happen anyway, I would imagine people would probably pay to come out there for the day. But it has to be done in the right way. And, and I don't know, that's another option. I would imagine that could take care of a lot of the expenses that we're talking about. And I know we didn't make any money that week. We were closed, right, David? So,
So you
That
want to
won't solve any of the traffic issues, though. That won't solve any of the traffic issues, which is really what's being called the table, right?
no, Jim, if you figure out a way to eliminate those ingress egress areas through people's yards, like close off 14 and 13, with fencing, and force people into the parking lot at Country Hills. And look, I'm just saying there may not be any interest in something like this at all, because it's going to require, people to come to work and manage a situation. It's just another option, but it would be, a way to control it.
That was something that was suggested to me, is that we could take reservations. Therefore, it would only be a certain amount of people. That could be a Google form online. It's really easily done. And it could be for an hour, and then they have to leave.
Respectfully speaking, guys, I'm not sure that, because of the numerous points of access to the golf course through both the city's property and the citizens' property, that can be controlled without an army of folks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways onto that course. That's for sure, Lynn.
Lynn, just a question. Was there any damage done to the fairways? Technically, city property, was there any damage done to the city property?
In this point, Mr. Bruce,
We don't really know.
right. In this point, Mr. Bruce, time will tell as it relates to when the Bermuda greens up and not greens up. But in this point, we are very blessed that there was a thick snow cover and ice cover, as had been described before. I think Rob related to an event that was probably 3 or 4 years ago when we had just a couple of inches of snow and ice, and they wore it down to the dirt at that point. But I think what caused the angst as it relates to the length of the duration of this event was because of the temperatures and the amount of snow, that it lasted for a substantial amount of time rather than a day or two, and everybody seems to forget about things that happen for a day or two.
I was just, again, I think it's tough to manage the people coming in and out.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to almost have to do an all or nothing situation, like Rob said earlier. Now we do close if we get a flood at Veterans Park.
Yeah, I was going to ask, not to interrupt you, Keith, but I was going to ask, how do you guys handle closure of a park or closure? Because after all, Country Hills is a property.
Yeah, we basically, at Veterans Park, there's a gate that goes back there, so we can shut the whole park down by that one gate. We do have, websites that people check before they go to the park for ball fields, soccer, baseball, softball, hockey, and so forth, to close them down. But if someone's doing damage to city property, I mean, that would give us a right to shut stuff down if they're damaging things. But we have shut whole parks down before due to weather.
Right. From a standpoint of your management company, at the end of the day, our perception is we don't feel like, because of the amount of access points, as we've discussed, the number of neighbors around the area, that we can fully restrict sledding at Country Hills, which happens once every 1 to 2 to 3 years. We don't feel like we could police that as your management company. We do feel like that the restriction, as Chris mentioned at the first of this meeting, that we would very much like to restrict any mechanized vehicles, as far as four-wheelers, side-by-sides, trucks, and the police presence, at least in Rob, you can speak to this probably better than I, Phillips, that it seems like when there was a police presence, that there was less problem as it relates to those kind of things, and kegs and cases of beer, et cetera. In the
Bonfires.
Yeah.
bonfires, et cetera, in those general areas. And we understand fully that the police have another role to play other than just to protect Country Hills Golf Course. But it is a city asset, as all of you have described, and we just would ask that anything we could do to be helpful, we can. If it's helpful that we open that parking lot to allow a point of access, as long as it's patrolled, where it can control the mechanized vehicles.
I agree with you. I just don't think, what Rob said, people are going to walk from that parking lot up to the hill on 13. I just don't think they're going to do that. It's too long of a walk and it's straight up the hill.
I agree, but you would need to definitely have somebody there, a police presence or something, because otherwise they'll try to drive their vehicles up there. You know, you would need something to stop that. I mean,
That's honestly why we were hesitant to open the gate until we got the phone call from everybody else. And I met the officer there on that Friday night and gave him a key.
Well, that situation, because the police department during that event, if it's snowing that much, they're going to be all over town working wrecks and something else. I think you'd almost look at a paid off-duty officer. If you
And
want someone
again-
there all the time to monitor that hill, I think you're going to have to look at something to that extent.
And it's very obvious at first, when the snow first hits, the people coming back in here, it's very obvious what they're doing back here because they're in four-wheel trucks. No cars with two-wheel drive can get back in here. I couldn't get out of my yard, out of here, until Saturday. So the vehicles coming in, at least for the first couple of days this year, it's pretty obvious. I would think a police officer standing at Masters Glen, checking cars as they come in, he's going to know. They're pretty smart folks. You know, if he says, "Do you live here?" and a kid looks up at him and goes, "Yeah, I live here," and he's got 14 sleds in the back of a pickup truck, surely that officer is smart enough to know you're lying to me. Turn around and leave. So, you know, I guess I'm going to agree to disagree as far as that's concerned. I think it's pretty darn obvious who's coming back in here. And a lot of times it's not the kids. Adults give us more
yes.
feedback, you know. And again, I'll share a story. Thursday night, the cul-de-sac was empty. There wasn't a car back up here, which is a blessing, just an absolute blessing. I'm on my front porch talking on my cell phone to my next door neighbor, and a guy pulls up and parks right at the end of my driveway. I kid you not. Gets out with two kids, a wife, starts leaving. My neighbor says on the phone, he says, "Is he going to park there?" And I asked the gentleman if he thought he was going to park there. He looks up at me and goes like this, throws his hands up like, "What, you got a problem with this?" This was Thursday. This is after the lady broke her leg and all the boondoggle down there trying to get through and all this kind of stuff. And I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "If I need an emergency vehicle, I need my driveway done." He started giving me more lip. Finally, the wife looked at him and said, "Move your truck." That's the kind of stuff, folks, we're putting up with. You tell somebody, you stand at your front door for hours watching these people do this. And a grown man, you look at him and go, "You realize you're about to trespass on private property?" And they look at you like, "So?" And this goes on from 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, sometimes till midnight. That's how bad it is.
They were parked all up and down Saundersville as well. I finally was able to get out of I live in Mount Juliet, so I couldn't get out till Friday, but I came by Friday so I could check the golf course, make sure there's no busted pipes in the pro shop, make sure nobody had tried to break in the cart barn and get AR golf carts or any of that. And I physically could not get in because the gates were blocked by all those cars. Lynn was there. Closest I could get was a mile away to park. You know, even asked that one lady, or the one guy, if he could move his truck. And he said, "Nope." And I run the facility. So, and I don't have any way of getting in there. So, I mean, it's a mess.
And I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but if someone pulls up in front of my house, gets out with a bunch of kids stuff, walks through my yard, and goes back onto 13, and you standing there saying, you realize you're trespassing stuff, and he just blows right by you like you're not even standing there. By the time I call a police officer and they try and get back up these hills, I mean, again, I don't know that they have four-wheel capabilities like these trucks do. By the time he can get back up here and see that truck, what's he going to do about it? That individual is already on the golf course. He can't ticket them for being on the street. That's legal. Again, I get back to, posting somebody somewhere that will try and at least alleviate, turn around some of these people from coming back in here. I'm sorry, Paul.
No, you're fine. I didn't want to interrupt. If I may interject, because I've listened, and what I'm hearing is a lot of good ideas to a very complex issue that there is not a perfect or good solution. But I think with the people that we have at the table and maybe some more brainstorming, I think we can come up with a workable solution. So we've talked about closing the park certain times. We have certain legal, I'll say we, the police department has certain legal obligations as far as due process about who we can stop for what purpose, being on a legal roadway and what obligation. And so there are certain limitations with things we've heard that would make it outside our parameters legally to do. But I've heard the closing, sunrise, sunset, and the problem again with this is more complicated by the fact that some of the locals, have enjoyed that. There's not been a problem. Now we have all these people. The problem is if we engage someone and they're violating a city ordinance or rule that we can prosecute for, we don't really have a choice who they are, where they live. They're in violation. So we can't pick and choose because that would be totally inappropriate too. So we've got a lot of issues there. The motorized equipment, we can certainly put regulations in place that prohibit that, and we have some teeth and some enforcement. Again, we look at resources when these storms come in. So the comment was made earlier that when these storms come in, our resources as far as the PD and sometimes the fire department are absorbed with just the crashes and everything else going on. So do we ramp up for something like that so we can protect? Is it an off-duty situation? So I truly don't think we're probably going to solve this problem in an hour meeting, but I think if we put our heads together and we start looking at all the different parameters as far as the suggestion about opening the parking lot, maybe direct them to a certain area. But from what I'm hearing, those are the honest and law-abiding people. There's those people that when they see a sign or there's, free parking coming, to go do this, they're not going to pay attention to that. They're going to run right up the hill. And for the people that are trespassing, I would no more, and I'm sure everybody on this meeting would no more think about parking in somebody's front yard and cutting through their yard to go sledding than the man on the moon. But there are those people out there that obviously don't care, as you described, Mr. Phillips, and those are the ones we have to deal with and the amount of resources. So I think we need to be prepared for that, and we need to come up with a master plan of how we solve this and put those steps into place. So whether it's limiting access by time, some regulations on motorized equipment so we don't have damage. If we're going to open up the parking lot at any point, then we're just saying you can come in. So we need to be careful about choosing that. If someone parks on the road and they're blocking the roadway from access, there are laws that can deal with that. But again, the resources. So we have to look at not only the laws, but the reality of how we're able to enforce that at that time. Does that have teeth? And can we even administer that given that time? So maybe some off-duty, or it's going to have a special, attention brought to that. It's not within the normal confines of our day-to-day operations. So we're going to have to look at maybe some special consideration to have an action plan should this take place. these are the actions we take. And unfortunately, that's probably the only way you're going to be able to address, because you have no access. I'm looking at Google Maps right now. You have no access control to this situation, because if we block off a fence here, they're just going to drive down the road a little further and they're going to come in the other way. And you know what I'm saying? If they had planes and they could parachute in, they probably would do that next. And so I think we look at this very detailed, complex problem. We identify all the issues, the parking, the trespassing. We're certainly concerned from a city standpoint about public safety and injuries. We don't want to see anybody get injured for any reason, especially on the park property. But so I think if we've got a really good start, I don't know what the agenda is for the meeting, but I've got some good notes here. I think it would be worthy of all of us and the city to say, because this, I can certainly sympathize with your situation, because if that was my house right there, I know how I'd feel about it as well. Somebody coming trespassing on my property. So I really value that as a concern. The public safety standpoint, an ingress and egress to the whole location with emergency vehicles. Somebody could be sled and have a very serious injury. And we've seen that happen just this past year with a small child, and I think it was down in Brentwood. That's so unfortunate. But if we have to get in there with a medical unit, I think Commander Rogan made a good suggestion about the FD having the four-wheel drives that we can get access to a little bit easier. So a lot of good suggestions to a very complex problem. So I guess what I'm suggesting here is we're not going to solve it in a 30-minute to an hour meeting, but I think we should have some follow-up. Let's identify all the problems, each of them, and let's sit down and really, from the standpoint of the park or the golf course, I'm sorry, the police department, the fire department, come up with some solutions that will limit the situation, because I don't think you're going to stop at 100%. I think if we limit it and minimize it, we're that much further along than just not doing anything.
Paul, this is Eddie. Let me also make a suggestion because I think Chris has come up with some excellent ideas. I like the idea of a closing time. I like the idea of prohibiting motorized vehicles. You know, maybe, Chris, the parking needs to be simmered a little bit more. But Paul, isn't it more appropriate for this parking issue to be handled by the Parking and Safety Committee that the city has? And maybe we could, Chris, we could refer, because we don't have any jurisdiction, the Golf Commission over the streets, is to refer this to the Parking and Safety Committee and let them come up with a plan. Luckily, I doubt we have any more snow this year. So we've got a little time to deal with this.
I think that's right, Eddie. And, I think Paul's made some really good comments that kind of help us bring this discussion today to a close. I think on a 365-day basis, the two things I've mentioned for the golf course are probably still appropriate. Leave the parking lot, put it in this other ongoing conversation, and let somebody from the city lead that. And, I don't think that's all the purview of the Golf Commission or Country Hills.
We certainly want to address the concerns from both standpoints. From the city standpoint for our citizens who live in that area, I think we need to address that.
Thank you.
Standpoint of the golf course, for safety, for the motoring public. So I think the only thing before we get off this subject, I'm looking at the map. So if I could get a little clarification where this parking area is on the backside, I'm not seeing that on the map. Is that a impromptu parking, or is that an overflow parking, or did I misunderstand?
Oh, I think what they're talking about is when you go up on either Spyglass or Masters Glen, or Country Hills, you get these areas where the big electric poles come through.
Yes,
and they're pretty wide open and kind of flat.
Okay, so
that's an excellent place to park.
Yeah. So it would be just past the Crestwood Court.
No, Crestwood Court is an issue. That's me.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing that's where the lines go through.
Yes,
high tension TVA lines go through just beyond that, correct?
From Crestwood Court, Paul, back down Spyglass Way toward Masters Glen entrance.
Correct.
That's the bulk of it.
Okay.
Once you get past past Crestwood Court, it's near impossible to get down to the golf course. It's almost straight uphill. Nobody's going to go through those woods. Again, I can't speak for what goes on the Country Hills side. I don't think people park on that side either because there's just not that much accessibility to good sledding.
They did have issues on that side as
Yeah.
well.
I'm sure they did.
I saw videos and there were just
Thank-
miles of cars parked on the side of the road, both everywhere.
Well, and again, if we, and that's part of the problem, so if we allow some parking back there, then what you'll have is I guess it's the anticipation that I can park back here. It's full. I can just pull over here and then it builds up and builds up. So we have to be careful what we allow because if you allow an inch, people will take a mile. And if you allow a mile, they'll take the entire golf course, so to speak. So I think that, and as was mentioned about the Traffic and Parking Commission, I think that's an excellent idea. So the good thing is I hope there's no more snow this year, but we do have some time. So I think we should take these ideas and develop some good plans with all the different disciplines in the city, the golf course, and come up with a contingency that will minimize or reduce that. But I can tell you this is not an easy problem to solve because of what's gone on in the past and the anticipation, what people expect. So just for example, and then I'll close with that, no matter what we do to prepare, next year, there are going to be those, even if we post some signs, put out some officers, there are going to be those that will try to, I guess, get around that to the best of their abilities. So let's put our heads together and keep working on this because I think it is an important topic. Because if not, there will be continued trespassing, there will be continued injuries, and I just hope there's nothing worse than that because we are not attentive to the problem. So does that make sense? Does everybody feel comfortable?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. I think we brought this discussion to a close. I think the city is going to lead this discussion in the future. I think certainly we're probably comfortable at the golf course if our golf management group represents us in that city-led discussion. And again, we may take resolutions as the golf course commission, a couple of them that we think that, can support this, but is in our interest 365 days a year. Okay?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, everybody.
Great.
Thank
Thank you.
everybody for being
Thank
on
you.
this subject. And at this point, we're going to resume our normal agenda for the Golf Course Commission. Anybody's welcome to stay on that wants to. All right. Resuming that agenda, we have determined that we have a quorum of commissioners previously. And the next thing on our agenda is the approval of the February minutes. Assume everybody's had a chance to review those. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Yes.
All right, Jim makes the motion. A second.
Rob that made the motion and Jim makes the second.
All right. Let's have a roll call vote to approve those minutes. Jim Carr, how do you vote?
Approved.
Rob Plinger, how do you vote?
Yes, approved.
Chris Maynard, how do you vote? Yes. Minutes are approved. Moving on the agenda, we'll get the February financial report by David Bess.
Okay. We have said many times, if we're going to have a bad month financially, let it be in the winter. We, as I reported, and has been discussed almost ad nauseum up to now. We missed a lot of days in the middle of the month. 11 straight days with no play, and our amount of play we had was 44% less than we had budgeted. But the overall numbers and the effect of that on operations was just not that severe because we don't anticipate a lot of revenues and profits in the winter months. Our income was $9,600 less than the budget, and the total budget was just under 31,000. So we missed by less than $10,000 of the budget. And moving down the list, we saved $4,600 in operating expenses, which is going to add to our profit or minimize our deficit, if you will, so that our net operating income for the month was a negative $21,000. And that was, here I say, only again $3,900 less than budget, because our budget for that month was projected a loss of $17,000. And our net cash flow for the month was a negative $28,000, which was about $8,500 less than budget. And the budget had projected a loss for February of just about $20,000. So the numbers would have been a heck of a lot worse, and if we had somehow had poor weather in the middle of the Gulf season. So for the first 8 months of the 2020-2021 fiscal year, our income was $131,000 more than budget and $136,000 more than the comparable period last year. And our operating expenses for the 8-month period, we've been able to cut into that deficit for the past couple of months, $10,700 above budget. So that our operating income, again, year to date, $56,700, which was $94,800 more than the budget, which projected a loss of $38,000. Our net cash flow year to date, $50,600, which was $91,000 more than budget, which projected a loss through February of just under $41,000. So, and the loss for last year to date, was $42,000. At the end of February, we had a cash balance of just under $130,000, compared with about $22,000 in the hole. That's negative last year. And as I said in the memo, disregarding the $30,000 that we had borrowed from the city up to that point last year. And that $30,000 could, of course, put us into a positive cash flow position. But without that, we would have had a negative 22,000 at that time. So we were not very severely impacted from a dollar standpoint, in spite of the pretty bad soft weather that we had in February.
Okay. Any questions for David? All right, moving on. Operations report from Brad.
All right. Well, March has been a little bit better than February was for sure. I apologize for not having any reports, the daily report. I just forgot to send it this morning in amongst all the rain. But currently, we're about halfway through the month. We've done 935 rounds out of the 1,700 budgeted. So we're up 10% there. The better part is we've done about $45,000 of the $66,000 budget for revenue. So we're about 20% above there. So the money's good. The rounds are good. And that's with, a pitiful, we had a great Sunday, but obviously Saturday we did 16 players. So today was nothing. So we're still looking good. The weather looks good tomorrow. Some more chance of rain. And then, but Saturday, Sunday are clear. Monday and Tuesday of next week should be clear as well. So, it's, we're still trending good. We're still, when the weather's good, they're coming out, starting to get some equipment in there and get the pro shop, back together and get some more merchandise in there. So sales have been good on that end as well. And before long, we'll start with a few of our tournaments and all that. So, except for the banquet room that we didn't budget much for it anyway, because we didn't know what we were going to be facing. Although we thought last year when we did the budget, by this time we'd be out of this stuff. But obviously that hasn't been spectacular. But we are getting some inquiries for later on. So all in all, it's been a good month. We're 20% up, and don't see that changing.
Good.
Brad, this is Eddie. We've started on have Monday play now, right?
Yeah, today was the first day. Great day for it.
And yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah, today was the first day. So we're open Mondays from here out, and we're ready to rock 7 days a week.
Brad, you said y'all were up 10% in rounds for the March?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
10% in rounds and 20% in revenue.
So far.
Anything else for Brad? Okay, Lynn, you're up.
All right, gentlemen, not much to report on the golf maintenance side of the equation in the month of February. Obviously, with the colder temperatures, we did spend a little bit of amount of time as it relates to some equipment maintenance and a lot of time cleaning up on the trash / sled damage. Kind of looking forward, as Brad has indicated, a couple of things. One, we've in lieu of our traditional spring aeration, we're going to do a process called dry eject, which is a combination of air and water and sand injection. That's going to occur on the greens on March 31st and April 1st. And our thought process is there, we can get away with that subcontracted event because of a couple things. We've got some good momentum, as Brad alluded to. We have several of our area golf courses that are getting irrigation systems or new greens or whatever. And I think using this method of aerification, rather than having the greens be affected for 2 to 3 weeks or longer period, they can be affected for about a week. And then we can create that income and reduce that expense from a subcontracted method to get back into playability a lot quicker. Again, that's going to occur on March 31st and April 1st. Other things that we have talked about in our previous meetings included the transfer line, which I have been working with Public Works, and as recently as about 30 minutes before this meeting talked to Trace there. And I think there's an agreement that that line would get replaced in the next 30 to 60 days. It's going through a current subdivision, and I think Public Works has worked through that process and will identify the best path for that to go to be out of their area of construction and create a permanent easement rather than a prescriptive easement for that. We've talked about the concrete pad on the back of the driving range tee. Originally, as I sent to you guys, I think late last week, our prescribed vendor, our low bidder on that, was going to originally begin construction late last week. With the rainfall, he elected to kind of push that back, and we're now targeted for Monday and Tuesday to install that range pad on the back side of the driving range tee in order to put some mats there. Again, our friends at Public Works have talked about a concrete wall in front of the creek. That's supposed to occur in the month of March, or I'm sorry, in the month of April or May. And the other event, maybe even more important than the sledding, et cetera, that happened in the snowstorm, with some damage to the cart/maintenance building. We're still in the process of getting information from the insurance company, the engineer from the insurance company, et cetera, as it relates to that potential repair. We had some column damage and some truss damage relating to that. I understand that hopefully very soon, in a conversation with Marshall, and thanks to Mr. Arsmeyer for his information, that we may be doing some temporary repairs to shore up that facility soon in order to make a good long-term decision rather than a quick long-term decision. And I think, as we've discussed previously, that's kind of a good example of the long-term needs at Country Hills as it relates to the irrigation system, the cart paths, all the infrastructure that's now approaching 35 years old at Country Hills. And we can kind of take that, kind of move forward within the budget process to kind of start to chip away at that, as David, realized for the first time in a long time, we've got money in the bank, if you will, at the lowest point of cash flow. So hopefully we can start to chip away at that. But I think there's some needs that, as we discussed previously, that the city will have to play a part of if they so choose to do so.
Any questions for Lynn?
Yes, I have a couple. I'm sorry, Chris. The moving of the water line through the development, whose cost, who is going to absorb that cost?
I'm not sure, Mr. Roberts. That's something that's a Marshall question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I had to step out for just a second. I don't mean to barge in, but I might be able to help address that question if I might.
Please.
Okay.
Yes.
So the last I've heard, I've talked to Marshall. I know what the situation is. I know the dilemma. And it's my understanding the current status of that is that John Bradley was talking with the developer and Marshall, the city, to see what the equitable solution to that problem is and how we can move forward. And so is it part on the developer, or can we agree to some mutual solution that part of it would be part of the developer and part of it would be the city's responsibility? So I know Bradley is in, for lack of a better term, maybe some negotiations to see what the best resolution for that is. And I think that's ongoing as we speak. So I talked with Andy Gilley the other day, and I think the obvious elephant in the room is here comes the warm weather, and we need to have irrigation, and we need to have it. We need to have a solution sooner than later, or we're going to have some dead grass, and we don't want that to happen. So I know from my conversation with Marshall and John that they're trying to resolve that so we can move forward.
Yeah, I would encourage you, Paul, to stay real close to that situation. It seems to me that if we've had our water line that served the golf course through this piece of property for X amount of years, that we have almost by right an easement. So if we're moving that water line because of a development, it sure seems to me on the surface that the developer should have to pay that and not the golf course or the city. So please be a strong advocate to get the developer to pay that cost.
That was my first question. Do we have, that is exactly my first question. Do we have an easement? Because if we do, I think that gives us some rights. But again, I'm asking John to just see what those are and see what the best advice legally to move forward. But I will certainly do that, rest assured.
Yeah. And Lynn, on the barn, I know that Andy said our insurance is $1,000 deductible. Is that all we're going to have to pay to repair the barn?
I'm not sure, Mr. Rose. I'm not sure. I mean, at this point, basically to my knowledge, there has been number of folks that have visited that facility from codes and Marshall and the insurance adjuster, and then an engineer from the insurance adjuster, which I think everybody got an email recently relating to that, and that his report is supposed to come back soon.
May I interject on that one as well? We're talking about the damage to the golf cart barn with ice damage.
Yes, sir. What
Yes,
they call it.
yes.
Yes,
So
sir.
it's my understanding, just again, I had to step out, so I don't want to talk about something that's already been discussed, but if you're asking for a status, I know there was a architectural engineer that came out and looked, and as you mentioned, several people. I think there's a temporary solution on the table that was reviewed by Marshall. He has recommended that, approved that. I have that in my hands. I approved that through this office, but it's in the form of a legal contract. So my understanding is that all legal contracts go through John. It is in his court right now to approve. It is a temporary fix, but I think it's a needed temporary fix until we can look at the total solution for the safety of the building and workers that are in and around the building, obviously, that something needs to be done right away is the way I understand it.
Yes, sir.
And so I've asked John to look at that. And as soon as I get that back, I think we can move forward on that as well. Yes, sir.
And Paul, while I've got you, I'm sorry, but is that something you want us to coordinate, or is that something that Marshall needs to coordinate through Public Works?
But I think it's probably at this point through Marshall, through Public Works, just for the simple fact that he has started the wheel in motion, that he's got.
We grow grass for a living, and we take care of golf courses, so he would be much better in that equation.
Well, and because it has to go through the legal channels and the appropriation of the money or what's in the budget. But
yes, sir.
By the way, it's nice to meet you. I'm Paul Harbismeyer. I've been seeing emails all the time, but jumping right in both feet here. So it's good to meet everybody on the board. I appreciate that.
Good to have you part of it.
Well, thank you. Again, it was good to meet everybody. I'm hit the ground with both feet running, but I do want to be attentive to that because that's important, obviously, to the process. So it's in the works.
Thank you.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay. Lynn, just a couple of questions here. I noticed from playing recently that we've got areas of damage, I don't know, fungus, whatever it was, on 2 and 13. I just wonder what we're doing about those areas.
Yeah, you read, there's 2 and 13, a little bit on number 11. That's basically a combination of some fungicide problems, some more issues. We'll take as best we can and plug out of our old nursery up on which is old number 6, which is right there that you pass between 6 and 7.
Right.
And we'll plug those and get those taken care of in the
Okay.
next couple of weeks.
One thing I noticed from playing recently too, and when we have wet conditions, we're kind of off the cart path, except a lot of times it's 4 holes, 1, 9, 12, and 17.
Yes, sir.
And I noticed that, you know, it's always a problem, but there's not good adherence. There's either lack of knowledge or lack of compliance with staying off some of those holes. And I just offered a suggestion, I think, to you and Brad about a temporary sign or sign that you put up on those holes. So if you leave the tee that says cart path only this hole, to try to draw people's attention to it. I think sometimes our small signs, they don't know where those begin in sometimes. Right. How do we address
we
that?
can do a better job at kind of placing those spots. I mean, as you played the other day, we missed, and as you referenced in your email, we kind of missed the mark as it relates to changing the sign on the on path and off path type thing on number 1. But we can address that. But as you went down number 1, you saw a litany of signs like about every 10 feet as it relates to don't get off the cart path at that point, because of the wetness there. We can do a better job of kind of signage to get that kind of taken care of through the process. And hopefully we can do that. And I liked your son about on this hole, and we can do that. I think it has to be bigger rather than the size we have right now.
Well, I think it does. That was the point of that example, that it needs to be bigger.
Right. And when they run over it with the cart, it'll be a more of a attention with the cart.
And Eddie, I forwarded a picture of those signs that we use at Bluegrass.
Yes, sir. I think we can make that work.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know, this may be more a question for Brad than you, and I don't know, Rob, I know you play a lot. Every time that I play, we're having a discussion on one or more holes. Is that a yellow flag or is that a white flag?
They're old and focused. They're old.
Half the flag is
Man,
black and
I am-
only half of it is colored, and those two colors are not that dissimilar from a distance.
They're
I am
old.
so glad you're bringing this up. I am so glad you're bringing this up.
And you know, I'll let you guys talk, but at the end of the day, our perception is we can switch to solid flags. You just guys tell us if you need 3, 2, 1, whatever. I'm convinced that 95% of the players that play at Country Hills are lucky to hit it on the green, whether it's the front, the back.
And I've heard it before, but you know, and I agree. We should probably maybe go with solid flags. But it's funny, most of the people that come and say something are the same ones that have the Bushnell rangefinders, where it really wouldn't matter if there was what color they were. That thing tells you exact yardage. So
right, but Brad's the one that hears it. We don't hear it, so we'll be happy to do whatever you guys want us to do.
yeah, solid
we do-
flags are fine.
I would suggest that we do some solid signs, whatever the solid flags, whatever the configuration, and continue to do the front, middle, and back.
I'm good with it.
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most of the guys, myself included. I mean, I don't use a rangefinder anymore, Brad. We use the little GPSs that give you the front, middle, and back to speed up play. My suggestion would be, and it is very difficult to tell whether it's a yellow flag or a white, but you guys are right. I mean, that for that one shot out of 5 where we managed to get it on the green. But I was thinking, red, white, and blue.
Well, here's the problem, Rob. I got about 20,000 scorecards.
Right.
Say yellow, white, red.
Okay.
Or whatever they are. I've got big granite signs say the same color. So we talked, Rob, Lynn and I talked about that today, and at some point we can change it, but that needs to be a concerted effort where we change some other things as well.
I get it. Okay.
Let's change it when Brad and Lynn say it's time to do so.
But I agree with the solid flags.
We'll get solid flags now.
It's a lot easier to tell what they are. So we can make that happen quick.
Yeah, we'll do that now.
All right, let's move on to other business. I think maybe we're ready for that, and hopefully we're getting close to bringing this to a close. I would like to see us continue the discussion about covering at least half of our new concrete pad with a continuous teeable surface that if it's only half, we'd use it in conjunction with our existing mats on the other, but start to transition at least in that direction.
Why is that? Just curious.
Well, one, it's going to be a new surface. It's going to be a better surface, and it's a more teeable surface that you can tee and hit drivers off of.
Well, Chris, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. I put a tee in those mats all day long. I don't know why some other people can't. I go out there and hit balls every day, and I put a tee in the mat. I don't understand why other people can't. Maybe it's just a different tee that I'm using, but anyway, I haven't had a good experience. I had the solid mat when I was in Birmingham. There's a big difference, in my opinion, between a public golfer and a private club golfer. We are a driving range, not necessarily a practice facility. And in Birmingham, when somebody would hit that thing real hard with an iron or tear up just a little part of it, it was a major problem versus these mats that we've already got. And they're certainly a lot more durable. I'll do whatever, but that's just my personal opinion. I haven't had good luck with the mats, but that was several years ago as well.
Chris, go ahead.
I just see, the and maybe my circle's not wide, but I see other people transitioning to that. I think it's a better surface. 12 Stones has got that material now, but theirs is different. You can't get a tee in it. I mean, it's a good surface to hit irons off of, but you can't get a tee in.
Right.
And so they're all not created equal.
Right.
You know, I've not seen the tearing potential, but again, my world's limited in that.
Yeah, my thought, Chris, would be that let's get the concrete pad in its entirety. Let's utilize the mats that we have now. Let's supplement those mats with a few with a few other mats in order to kind of accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, and then don't rule out the ability either on the far end or the front end or the
Right.
top to figure that out at another time. I just think from a standpoint of kind of cost and other needs for Country Hills at this point, we've got that continuous surface with the concrete is very tough to get a tee in, as you kind of referenced just a second ago. And so I think we can kind of accomplish what we want to accomplish through the process, but not rule out the future and move forward at that point as our existing mats and our new mats wear out. I think it's easier to replace a 5x6 or a 5x6 square rather than a 5x75 yard square from a standpoint of cost when it's necessary. But I think it's a good idea. We just need to, I would rather see us kind of inch towards that rather than move that way initially.
Yeah, I see the range as a revenue. I think increasingly it's a source of revenue.
Sure.
And I would just like to see us support that. And
Yes, sir. No problem at all.
Absolutely.
No
Absolutely.
problem at all. Look, you don't get the text from Brad every Monday morning about when I'm coming to Top Breast to driving range too.
Yeah.
So he's on top of the revenue potential.
I'm trying to hold out a couple more weeks.
He's
Keep
doing
off that
good.
grass till it
He's
starts
doing good.
growing.
Well, if it's not growing, you don't want to be on it.
He's doing good.
I have to be sheriff. I have to be a sheriff every now and then.
He's
Yep.
doing good.
Let me bring up one other, or let me revisit, I guess, one other subject. Going back to the snowstorm thing, that's the snowstorm. I think it's evident in the conversation that was had. It's a lot bigger than us in
Yeah.
Country Hills, and the city needs to take the lead on that. I think we need to be represented in that conversation. Again, like was said by Paul, we weren't going to solve that today, but we do need to be moving toward that. Discussion needs to move ahead. The one thing I would say, the two things that I suggested for us for 365-day issues, are they appropriate?
I think so.
Second.
The hours of operation and no motorized vehicles.
I agree.
Now,
Yeah, I agree because there'll be limited times if we have something in the banquet room, or if we have a morning tournament that we got to get there early for. But other than that, I think that's a great rule year round. Hey, you know what? The place is off limits, after dark.
And I think the language would include those two things, Brad, because the way I had thought about it is the resolution affirms that the golf course property is closed to all on-course activity from 30 minutes after sunset to 30 minutes before sunrise, except for normal on-course maintenance and rental of our clubhouse meeting space.
I think that's perfect. I would love to have that.
And the second one says resolution that prohibits the operation of any motorized equipment on the course except for that of Country Hills equipment.
Correct. Yes.
Can I get a motion to adopt those two resolutions?
Chris, let me ask you, well, I'll wait till discussion. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Eddie. You might have, go ahead.
So does there need to be an exception? I mean, it's probably not needed, but Paul, does there need to be an exception for emergency vehicles? Or did you include that, Chris, that language of emergency vehicle?
We're not going to have any emergencies, Eddie. Surely we're not gonna have any, no, you're right. You're right. That I don't know if it needs to be in here or if it's understood. I don't know.
I would suggest that it would be listed for clarification as an exception for emergency service vehicles so that there's no question or point of information that someone could say, well, they're doing it.
Yeah, it's selective. We don't want to be guilty, and it was kind of inferred in that other discussion about access of selective enforcement or whatever.
Sure.
So
I
we
would
would
just-
add emergency vehicles to that one. That one may read a resolution that prohibits the operation of any motorized equipment on the course except for that of Country Hills equipment and emergency vehicles.
Yes. Yep.
Good point, Eddie.
Yep. Very nice.
Okay, Chris, this is Jim Carr. I make the motion to adopt that language.
For those two resolutions,
Yes.
is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote to adopt the two resolutions on golf course access and the prohibition of motorized equipment. Roll call vote. Jim Carr, how do you vote?
Approved.
All right, Rob Blinger,
I vote yes.
Chris Maynard votes yes, the motion passes. All right, is there any other business before us today?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes,
Lynn mentioned earlier about a wall right there at the creek to try to keep some of the balls from going in the water. Can you give me a little more information about that, Lynn, the height or how long or the expense?
and also include in that, if you would, Lynn, how that's going to address, I think, Jim Carr's ongoing concern about ricochets.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, guys, we're just looking for something that would allow us to catch some percentage of the golf balls that we spend a lot of money to replace, A, and a lot of manpower to pick, B, in that creek. So we feel like if there was a small 2 to 3 foot tall area concrete thing there in that area, probably outside of the area of wetland influence in front of that creek, and Trace has agreed to kind of work that into his process through that process, and he indicates in the month of April or May that would happen. We would start out with a kind of a small experimental 150 foot long ish spot right behind the existing middle target green,
Yes,
and
sir.
kind of gauge our positive or negative. A long time ago, I know we've been an hour and 36 minutes into this equation, but a long time ago, we did have some kind of a barrier up there, and every time it rained, it would end up in the middle of Saundersville Road. And a concrete scenario is the best scenario to get us. I think we can get a big percentage of the issue taken care of with a small barrier. I don't think that it's going to be an issue that something bounces off there and ends up in the road or hits somebody, because it's a pretty good piece away from somebody hitting balls. And it's substantial, and we can't tear it up with the picker or our mowing equipment or our weed eater. So I think it's a long-lasting solution.
And probably less expensive than some of the other options we were looking at.
Yes, sir. I mean, at the end of the day, we would like to pipe the creek, but I mean, nobody ever designs a driving range creek. Nobody ever designs a creek through the middle of the driving range, but we are where we are.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other business before us today?
I have a question, Mr. Maynard.
Yes.
Is this the conversation from the first meeting? Is that going to the safety committee? I don't know if that was something that Paul would put on the safety committee, or Mr. Robertson would put on the safety committee for the next meeting for their month, or what the next step would be of that, because Mr. Phillips would probably want to know that information.
Eddie, did you suggest the safety committee?
I did. Paul, you want to talk about it?
Yes, the Public Safety Committee would be obviously a starting point, as well as the Traffic Commission, to look at those limitations and so forth. So I think maybe starting with the public safety is the what I call a kickoff point. Absolutely. And
So, Paul, you probably need to let Mr. Phillips know so he can at least participate in those meetings and see what's going on.
Sure. If somebody can answer this for me, I can go back and look at the email thread, but was his contact information listed in there?
Yeah, just send it to the golf course. He actually works for me.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And I'll get with that on the agenda as well to be able to start that process, looking at a good solution. I
Perfect.
can do that.
Okay, anything else today?
Just a couple of things. I don't want to kick a dead horse, but I will. The snow situation, I hope that that continues on through the different departments in the city and they come up with something. I imagine what the course would look like had we not had 5 inches of ice under the snow. It'd probably be all kinds of damage out there. I think we got all things considered as far as damage to the course. And that seems to be the one issue that probably concerns us more than anything as far as figuring out a way, because next time it could simply just be 3 or 4 inches of snow and that could cause a heck of a lot of damage. I promised myself I wouldn't bring anything up that was going to cost any money today or revenues. So I want to end my participation with some positive comments. I continue to get extremely positive feedback on the condition of the course throughout the winter golf season. And it all goes back to the blower that was purchased last spring or last fall. A lot of comments on how clean the course was, free of leaves and twigs and things like that. So again, I want to thank everybody for making the decision to get the blower and the range balls. The new range ball cleaner is working great. Balls are getting cleaner, and
Amen.
looking forward to the range pad. It's really going to make a nice enhancement.
Agree.
And thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Rob.
Hey, anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good to meet everyone.
Thanks, Tina.